remember a visionary saying to me, Adam, why is it taking my team so long to get onto the same page as me? And it's like, they don't need to be on the same page as you. They just need to be making sure that we're working together. Having worked with a lot of CEOs, visionaries over the years, is that really understanding what your why is, I believe, is a really important piece.
The visionary role is that big picture thinking, where are we headed, looking for that future stuff. The integrator is about executing on a day-to-day basis on the plan to get there. Hello and welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I'm your host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs lead their ideal lives by creating a better business. Today on the show, I am chatting with my work brother, Adam Harris, and we're going to be talking about all things visionary. So there are a couple of books out there that have been released in the EOS book series called Rocket Fuel and Visionary by Mark C. Winters. And these really talk to that visionary integrator relationship. And we just thought it'd be great for us to chat about that and share some of our insights from our own personal experiences, but also from the experiences of our clients. So please welcome to the show, Adam Harris. So it's great to have my work brother, Adam, back on the show again. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you for having me as always.
Oh, it's going to be fun as always. So we're going to talk about visionary stuff today, which I think before we get started, we should probably just introduce ourselves a little bit so that people know who we are, but also what role we play in the various businesses that we run as well. So for people who've never listened to the show before, Adam, why don't you give them a little background about yourself and then also what role you play in our businesses?
Cool. Thank you, Deborah. I'm pretty convinced that the first questions that came out of my mouth were why. I'm an incredibly inquisitive, intuitive individual. Actually got me into a lot of trouble when I was younger. I struggled to find where I belong and kind of had my first business when I was kind of 8 years old, helping or doing car washing. I had a bit of a car washing empire. Fast forward through the years, I'm a qualified butcher, baker, candlestick maker. I'm a true visionary in the fact that I see opportunities and kind of, I do a lot of improv comedy. And there's a phrase that we use, which is yes and. So anytime I'm faced with a situation, it's like, oh, wonder where the opportunity is here. So I've had a couple of strange things over the years. I was a professional lookalike for a number of years. But that's maybe for another episode. And I had a business that supplied inflatable extras to the TV and film industry. So yeah, we had 15,000 blow-up dolls. But really, probably for the last 15, maybe 18 years, I've been a coach, facilitator, speaker, author. And I would say that I am truly visionary because I see the big picture. I don't like getting stuck down into the weeds, into the day-to-day. So I look at things from that diverse perspective. What if, why not, what next? So yeah, that's me.
Perfect. And for those of you who know me, you'll see that we have some kind of similar backgrounds. We're both from the UK. I also have my first business very, very young. I used to make and sell tiny little mini notepads and envelopes and things as I was an avid writer. And I had this thing about miniature stuff. So I used to make these things and sell them at school. And then obviously got put into the traditional workforce because my parents thought I should get a good job to attract a great husband. So that has been but now in terms of business, I have obviously been running businesses since my very, very early 20s. And I also am a visionary, but a slightly different visionary to Adam in terms of I'm very good at seeing the big picture, but then I also have this capacity to bring it right the way down to the ground still in a big sense, not to minute detail, but be able to take those massive concepts and translate them into everyday stuff. And so Adam and I have a couple of businesses together. We have Business Action, which is our EOS implementation business. And then we have Integrated Executives, which is about to rebrand to Sherwood Foundry. And in those roles, so in the Business Action thing, we actually, in both of those companies, we have a unique situation where we actually have two visionaries and two visionary boxes. We have an integrator that actually runs the practices for us. And so we always say that, it's unusual to have two visionaries, but if you do want to do that, you've got to have two separate boxes and be very, very clear about what each one does. And so within our businesses, Adam is the big picture visionary, the one that sees the massive opportunities, connects the dots. I'm the one that is about operationalizing that, but not down to day-to-day level of detail, but more about how do we take those big concepts and implement in the business. And yeah, so that's how I would describe it. Anything to add to that, Adam?
Yeah, I think what you just said there about the definition of the roles is really important. I've got a couple of businesses that I'm working at the moment that also have two visionaries. My favorite saying of all time, and those listeners that have heard me before knows that clarity creates confidence. So having that clarity and that definition is really important. I don't necessarily think so much for the visionaries themselves, but actually when you cascade them through the organization to know and understand, especially as a leadership team, who's accountable, who's owning, and who's responsible for what in the differing boxes is a really important piece.
Yeah. I had it with a client that was in the wealth management space. And again, they had two visionaries and it was very, very specific. So they had one that was very much about mergers and acquisitions and really big growth. And the second one was more about that organic growth, but looking for the opportunities with partnerships and relationships. So, as long as you're very, very clear about what each one does, it can work. It's not normal. It's not something we see all the time, but it certainly is something that can work if put in the right context. So we're going to talk about visionary stuff today because obviously we are both visionaries, but also Mark Winters released his book Visionary a few months ago, and we've been sharing that book with our clients and been having conversations with Mark Winters as well. And we just thought, like, why don't we explore what it really means to be a visionary and hopefully give some insight into visionaries for other visionaries. So I've got a whole bunch of questions. We've asked our chat GPT to give us a whole bunch of questions as we always do. And we're gonna chew the fat and answer these questions for you. So Adam, I'm gonna ask the first one for you. What does the word visionary actually mean and where do people misunderstand it?
Yes. The word visionary is and this is just my understanding and definition is it's about being able to see the big picture, but actually also to create the picture that doesn't quite yet exist. There's the things that we know, there's the things that we don't know, and there's the things that we don't know that we don't know. And actually, given the right space and opportunity, a visionary is able to kind of go into that space of kind of intrigue, wonderment, and kind of go to places that maybe often that they wouldn't be able to do normally. If I reflect on businesses that are running on EOS, the visionary is so caught up in the day to day that actually they don't have that ability to have that level of thinking and be able to kind of think 6 months, 12 months wider because they haven't let go. There's probably a lack of a lack of trust, and there's probably some level of fear. So when you can create the foundation and the right leadership underneath, actually that then creates the space for them to kind of think further. What about you?
Well, just thinking as I was listening to you, then it's like you can't see the wood for the trees, right? You're so deep in the weeds that you just cannot see the stuff that you need to see. And I think there's a really great saying. I'll probably get this wrong, but visionaries, they're considered crazy in the beginning until they actually are right. And then all of a sudden they're geniuses. And we often see that is that they have that ability to see so far ahead and really reimagine things that most people can't keep up with them and therefore can't understand what they're trying to do. And I think that's the important thing is that you need that. Otherwise the business stagnates and doesn't grow.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting piece there, which is if the visionary is communicating through to the integrator and the rest of the leadership team, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, then maybe the visionary is not thinking or believing big enough. Like you kind of want a little bit of healthy tension into, the integrator or the rest of the leadership team to go, wow, I've got no idea how we're ever going to create, build, whatever that is. And actually part of the visionary's role is to kind of, have that level of conceptual ideas or big picture thinking, and then kind of go, okay, how now do we take that and then bring it back down to kind of, reality?
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting about this is, the term visionary, I'm sure it's been around for a long, 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 long time, but in the concept or in the context of EOS, it was introduced by Gino and Mark many, many years ago in their first book, Rocket Fuel. And what it said was you have to have a visionary role and then this integrator role. And these two really need to work together like two pieces of a puzzle to get the most from business. And if you think the visionary role is that big picture thinking, where are we headed, looking for that future stuff, the integrator is about executing on a day-to-day basis on the plan to get there. And if you don't have both of those roles, the person who is the founder of the business is trying to do both. And that's like trying to be a unicorn because you're trying to be big picture, reimagining, and at the same time managing all the minute detail and really getting involved in the business. And I think that for me, when I first came across EOS and then I read the Rocket Fuel book, that was a real game changer. It opened my eyes up to some of the businesses I'd run in the past where I was trying to do but and wondered why I was struggling.
Yeah, and also I found over the years that there's a number of visionaries, inverted commas, who have somebody potentially sitting in that integrator seat, but actually they're kind of the visionaries micromanaging them. The structure doesn't, and the relationship and the context and the boundaries don't exist for actually the integrator to really fully do what they need to do. They And interestingly, I was having a conversation with somebody last week, where they have got an integrator, but the visionary still has kind of got almost that grit, and there's absolutely a stranglehold. And it's like, and if the relationship is strong enough, then the integrator should be turning around and going, okay, where's the itch? Where's the rub? What's stopping you from letting go? Let's work through this together. And often I don't see those conversations happening because the visionary hasn't enabled and transferred the trust through to the individual that's sitting in the integrator seat.
Now let's explore that a little bit further. So, why do you think that founders do struggle to let go? Because they often, we've seen this all the time, right? We work with EO members and Vistage members and tech members and things. Is they'll read the book and they'll go, yes, this is it. This is what I need. I absolutely need an integrator. And they really understand the difference between the two roles. They then either go out and find someone or somebody in their organization. They allow them to step up to be the integrator, but they don't actually let go. Why do you think that happens?
I feel that there's a number of potential different reasons. I think one is they've not got the right person sitting in the right seat for starters, i.e. the role either hasn't been defined, or if it has been defined, then the capacity and capability of the individual is not where it needs to be. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is often there is trauma from the visionary in the fact of, and that may well be from lived experience within the business or some trauma from, years ago as to what's the barrier. There's a level of resistance from them being able to let go, which is about them as an individual. And often if I reflect back to kind of, my days as a Vistage chair, is that often there was some real deep stuff to kind of work through there. And a large part of it, and this is kind of the third thing I'd say, is that a lot of it's actually around kind of fear. So, fear is kind of false evidence appearing real, is that there's a story that's created in the head, which is, I can't let go because ... And actually there's no sense of reality that kind of sits behind that if that assumption is challenged. And I also believe that there's this thing which is actually a lot of owner founders, visionaries, they actually love the chaos. So when they have team members that are on the edge of their seat, they don't necessarily feel comfortable or confident, and they have a lack of clarity. That kind of, chaos theory. In fact, there's one visionary that I know. The rest of his leadership team call him Captain Chaos because he just comes in and just stirs the honey pot, you know, drops a big bomb, walks out, and it's like, huh? What? How are we going to now kind of deal with it? So, yeah, I think there's a number of contributing factors. That's my thoughts. What about you?
I always describe them as seagulls. They come in, they shit all over the place, and then they disappear again. And you're right. I think there is a certain element of being addicted to chaos, but I think that comes from a little bit of a fear in terms of, but what will I be doing if I'm not actually involved in the day-to-day running of the business? And I had this with one of my visionaries that I worked with many years ago, and we worked through it, and she brought on a really strong leadership team, and they really stepped up and they took over the running of the business. And then all of a sudden she felt lost. It was like, so if they're doing all of that, what am I doing? And I had to talk her through, well, actually, you should be going back to doing what you did when you first started the business, which was a true visionary. She'd actually revolutionized the industry she was working in. And she had spent a lot of time thinking about how to change and revolutionize that industry. I said to her, guess what? Now you've got the time to do that all over again. And you're not caught up in the weeds, and that's what you should do. And she's like, yeah, but I don't feel like that's really adding value. And it took her a little while to get back to being a true visionary because she had been so caught up in that day-to-day functioning of it. So I think there is that element of, but, well, what will I do if everybody else is running the business?
Let's go on to the next question. When when does being a visionary become a superpower, and when does it become a liability?
Okay, so a superpower is when you really truly are freed up to do that big picture stuff that we know will eventually change the world. And I think you have to have space to do that. So if you're caught up in the minute detail of day-to-day running, you're never going to do that. So that's when it's a superpower. And as I said, visionaries literally change the world because of the way that they think and the way they think differently to most other people. When it becomes a liability, in my opinion, is when they are not letting go, not allowing their team to kind of step up and not recognizing that they should stay in their box. And I don't mean that in a negative way, as in get back in your box, but it really is about being very clear about where you add the most value and allowing others to actually step up and do the things that where they add the most value. What about you?
I think I don't think I know one of the things I love about EOS is it creates the framework to create the conditions for success for the visionary. So it allows for do what you need to do, but understand that you can't do everything, and it's about making sure that we make the right decisions at the right time. Have the ideas, know where to put them, compartmentalize them individually or collectively as a team to allow you to be the best version of yourself, but actually more importantly, to add the most amount of value to yourself, but also to the business. The liability comes when, as the owner founder, more often than not, is that they pull rank and they go, yeah, but it's my company. Like, when you're playing that card, you have to question yourself, kind of going, for what benefit? There may well be the case that I might win the short term battle, but you know, what's the long term war? What we're trying to achieve here as an organization, and what's the damage that I'm causing for the business? And I think it's important that there's an awareness, even if you're the owner founder and it's your inverted commas baby, is it's its own entity. So the decisions or the home runs, as we might call them, that you're deciding to do, I think there's a real piece which is challenging those decisions and kind of going, are you really doing what's best for the business, or are you actually feeding your ego? And I think there's some conversations that individuals need to be having either with themselves in the mirror or potentially with their integrator, or a coach, or sitting in a mastermind group, because, just making those quick, snappy, rash decisions, which a lot of visionaries are kind of renowned for, it's not demeaning the success that you've had up till this point, but it's like, in order for the business to be a success, subtle changes are going to make a big difference in the medium to long term.
Mm. Yeah, it's true. Which leads very nicely into the next question. So, what are the classic signs that a visionary has become the bottleneck in their own business?
Well, I work on a phrase which is denial is the first sign of admittance. Actually, the biggest thing for me is if there's no healthy conflict and everybody's saying yes, then you've created potentially a dictatorship, and or you don't have people strong enough that are challenging your own assumptions. So I think that's a big warning for me. The other thing is that if you're, and again, if you're not used to having external challenge, whether that be a coach or a peer group, is that you only know what you know. So if you've been shown as a leader that this is the way to do things, and you've got a successful business, actually it may well be the case that you've got no awareness that actually there's a different way of doing it. And I'm not saying for 1 minute that EOS is going to answer all prayers, and but having a framework and having the challenge internal, I believe, is a really important piece. And if you've not got that, then I would be asking yourself, why is everybody saying yes to everything that I do? And if I've not got any challenge, then, I've just created extensions of myself. Now, some people may say that's a positive thing. I would say that healthy conflict, like one of the things I love about the fact that you and I are both visionaries is that I might say something, we had this last week, is that I was like, oh yeah, but what about this? And you go, yeah, but Adam, you've not thought potentially about this and this. Actually, yeah, you're probably right on that. And that kind of backwards and forwards, I feel, is a really important conversation that needs to have.
And I think that, that is where the integrator role is so key in the business as well, and having the right person in that role that actually supports that visionary, but does challenge them. Because if the visionary and the integrator have a good relationship where they've got that healthy conflict, it encourages the rest of the team to also be open. Because once you start to become vulnerable yourself, you can see that opening up other people and being able to do it. But you're right. There are we've all done it, right? We sit through the level 10 meetings where there just don't seem to be any issues. And it's really just because you've got a whole bunch of yes people kind of going, yes, yes, yes. But the scorecard and the rocks say otherwise.
Yeah. And that's probably a good early warning signs is that, the data is saying one thing, but the conversations are saying something different.
Yeah. The other thing about the whole bottleneck thing is you do see it where even when you've got a very, very large company and a leadership team, there's stuff when rocks aren't being done. I think that's sometimes a warning sign because the rocks aren't being done because when you actually start digging deeper as to why they're not, is because they're waiting on the visionary, or they've been hijacked by the visionary, or perhaps they've been given other tasks by the visionary. And then you start to realize that actually this business is not running purely on EOS, that there is still that whole end run thing where the visionary is going in and going, yes, I know that we agreed on that, but I really want this done. And everybody jumps and goes, yes, sure. How high?
Oh yeah. It reminds me of, I can't remember that song. You say jump, I say how high. You're playing dead. You got a bullet in your head. Anyway, next question. Why do so many visionaries say they want freedom, but keep designing businesses that depend on them?
I think we may have touched on this before, but I think it's a little bit of ego. And as I said, there's also a thing with visionaries in terms of wanting to feel wanted and needed. And so therefore they don't, they like to be sort of be seen to be in charge. And yeah, what am I trying to say here? They They actually enjoy. I mean, I sometimes say that a lot of our visionaries are like arsonists. I think they love creating little fires because then they can become the hero that actually puts the fire out. And so I think that often that is the challenge, is that they say they want freedom, but then they actually kind of get a little bit off on the chaos that they create.
Yeah. Having worked with a lot of CEOs, visionaries over the years, is that really understanding what your why is, I believe, is a really important piece.
Mm.
Having worked on a one-on-one basis with over 150 owner founders, there's often there's story and reasons as to why they're doing what they're doing, and it's either toward a move towards something or away from something, and that may well be something that happened in their childhood. It may well be in a previous boss or organization. It may well be screw you, other shareholders that I was involved in your business. But actually, there's a really important piece, is that if you know and understand where that motivation comes from, it allows you to then know and understand how you're behaving in certain situations, which then allows you to then kind of go, okay, so why am I doing this? Okay. And then the question then is that, okay, so what does freedom look like? I was speaking to somebody in the US a couple of weeks ago. They're earning a substantial amount of money. Their business is incredibly successful, but they struggle to spend any money on themselves. And there's deep rooted stuff that's there. And actually it allowed us to kind of explore and kind of go a little bit further. It's interesting. Like I feel that the EOS Life book is a really important book to kind of understand. That it talks in there about that the 5 aspects. Do what you love with people that you love, making a huge difference, being compensated appropriately with time for other pursuits. Like that ability as a visionary to kind of take a step back and go, what's all this for? Like, is it for ego? Is it for revenge? Is it for, generational wealth? Is it for what's underneath it. I don't think enough time is spent as a visionary in understanding what that why and what the end game is.
Yeah, and it's a key part of the Visionary book and also the EOS Life book, which is know thyself. You actually need to really, truly know thyself. And yes, it comes back to your why, but it also comes back to, as you said, what is actually driving you? And then what are your triggers? Because we all know that due to our previous childhood, our past, whatever it might be, we've got certain triggers. We might be trying to prove something. I know that a lot of my motivation early on was very much about pretty much sticking it to my dad because my dad sort of, wanted me to get married, settle down, have children, live in with a white picket fence happily ever after. And he always negated the work that I did in terms of my business. And so it was always like I wanted to prove to him that no, I can do this. I've got this. And it was a driving thing, but it was also a trigger because of course, whenever I felt I'd failed at something, I would get horribly, horribly defensive.
My triggers are about being heard and being held. The aspect for me for when I was growing up is that I was always very inquisitive, and I never felt as if I belonged and could be just my authentic self. So the important thing for me is the reason why I do what I do is that, I create a world of intrigue, challenge and wonderment by holding space, supporting others and making people feel comfortable in going to the places that they otherwise wouldn't, So again, when you understand that for yourself, it really, I feel for me and the people I've worked with, and I know you and I have had conversations about this, is that it just makes things so much easier because you know the reasons why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of my triggers is about being alone as well. And I think that's also probably why we love doing masterminds and peer groups and things is because, that feeling where I always felt like I was different to everybody else that I ever came in contact with. And then suddenly you meet other people, other visionaries, you kind of go, oh, this is normal. This is okay. This is actually this is a normal thing. And I think for the opposite side of that coin is the integrators, when they're working with these visionaries, which let's face it, can be tough. Having a peer group where they kind of go, oh, that happens to you too. Okay, it's not just me.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the next question is around what is the difference between having big ideas and having a clear vision?
There's an aspect which is called golden penny syndrome, which is, oh, something shiny. Let's go over there. And then a short time goes by and then it's like, oh, something shiny. Let's go over there. I feel that the thing on this is actually around when you have a vision, a thought, an idea kind of going, right, okay, this is an overarching as to, who we are, why we exist, where we're heading. Cool. Then as the ideas then start coming up and percolating or they're found, is how does that idea contribute, add value, significantly change, impact the big vision as to where we're heading? So what it does is that all of those ideas are percolating and coming up. And it's like, oh, okay, that one's going to help us go towards, that one's going to help us go away. Okay, so actually I believe then it allows the visionary to prioritize the ones that are important in line with the vision.
And it's that old adage, isn't it? If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, which means hey, you've got to have that vision very, very clear, not only in your own mind, but also in the minds of all of your team, which is where that VTO is so important, is having that 2-page plan where we've got that 10-year big, hairy, audacious goal. We know what our core focus is, and it can really help us to look at those ideas and sort of ask the question, does it really make the boat go faster? Does it take us in the right direction or doesn't it? And let's face it, I mean, me in tech. I mean, I'm always getting distracted by, oh, look, another kind of piece of tech over here, and oh, look, another little gadget I can have, or whatever it might be. And it's really good to have that to hook back into your why and what you're trying to achieve, and go, does this really help, or is it just another Debra obsession?
Well, just as a side note, the last recommendation that you had for software was amazing.
Whisperflow.
Whisperflow. It's been a game changer for me in the last week, so I'm happy with that. I think the big thing on this though is that it basically is a filtration system, and it just allows you very quickly to kind of go, yep, that one in, drop that one in, drop that one in. Okay, no, push that. And I think actually when a visionary is able to kind of, even if it's like 50% of the ideas are going one way, 50% of the ideas are going another way, that level of filtration because all visionaries, we don't want to stifle those thoughts, those ideas, that creativity, but just instantaneously being able to qualify half in and half out is a big, big game changer for a lot of people. Cool. Next question. I like ChatGPT has done us proud. I love this question. How can a visionary tell the difference between a genuinely great idea and a shiny distraction wearing lipstick?
It knows me too well, doesn't it? Okay. This is actually a really interesting one. I'm not even sure that I can genuinely kind of answer this because I often get distracted by shiny distractions wearing lipstick. How can you tell that? I mean, I think I'm actually going to put my integrator hat on because, as you know, I'm one of the few people who scores very highly in both of these areas. And I know that when I am working with visionaries as an integrator, one of the things that I tend to do is if they've got a great idea, you should never, ever detract from that or put it down because you just never know. It might seem really odd to you because it doesn't feel like it fits in, but that idea might percolate into something that is really quite different and really good for the business. And so what I tend to do is I tend to push back on the visionary and sort of say, yes, that is a fantastic idea. Why don't we do a little bit more thinking about that? Why don't you go and take a clarity break and have a think about how that might fit in and really get them and push back a few times to get them to really look a little bit deeper into it. Because if they spend a bit of time on it, they will start to understand if it genuinely is a great idea or if it is something that is just another distraction. And so I think that's my thing as an integrator is like, if you can push back a couple of times, not in a negative way, because that idea might actually morph over time as they think about it more deeply and it could have a massive impact on the business. But it's about just not jump. We think too fast as visionaries, right? What a great idea. Oh, I heard that. Right, let's go ahead and do that right away. It just gives it a bit of time to really percolate and work out what the gold is within that thinking. What about you from the visionary perspective?
I think you've just summed it up there is that it's, as a visionary, it's very easy to see all those great things, but it's almost like it's a very quick knee-jerk reaction. And I feel that there's times when that is appropriate, but most of the time, actually, just having that pause, just having that sounding board, just having that challenge, first and foremost, in the same page meeting with the integrator, second, potentially, discussing with the leadership team, at an L10 or at the quarterly is a really important, it's almost like a qualification piece, which is going, yeah, actually, maybe that's not the right thing, or it's a really good thing, but not now. Like, relevancy is a real key part because we need to keep the wheels turning. And we need to build, one of the great things, again, I love about EOS is that we're building the foundations. And actually you get to that perspective where the foundations are built. And then all of a sudden you get the hockey stick from a traction perspective because the foundations have been built. The culture exists. Now we can take those big things on. I feel that there's an aspect, which is as a visionary, which is like, you've kind of got to take 3 to 5 steps back to build the foundations to actually create the engine, which allows for the flywheel, as Jim Collins would say, to then be able to really start turning. Because if the flywheel's turning now, hell, we can really get some shit done. Like, and that actually then becomes a really important piece for the visionary. But, it's almost like that first bit, and that may well take a couple of years, is kind of like long and a little bit laborious. It's like, I remember a visionary saying to me, Adam, why is it taking my team so long to get onto the same page as me? And it's like, they don't need to be on the same page as you. They just need to be making sure that we're working together. Like, you will always be where you are, but we just need to bridge the gap between the two to make sure that, the wheels are turning.
Yeah, it's that slow down to speed up thing as well, isn't it? It's like we as visionaries, we think fast, we act fast. We work at a different speed to most other people, and I think that you have to bring them on the journey, and so that does take some time. So it's a slowing down to bring them on the journey. Yes, it's frustrating when they don't see what you see, but at the same time, they will get there. And like you said, if you're going to get the machine working well, then you can throw more things into it. It's what I love. I'm looking at our VTOs in front of us at the moment. What I love about the VTO is that there is that long-term stuff. So as a visionary, you can still keep hooking back into that long-term. What are we actually wanting to do long-term? But there's a really clear focus. And I think the danger is that visionaries want to keep throwing more things in, and that distracts people from what needs to be done. If we can just allow them to get on with those rocks, they fundamentally change the way the business operates. And then over time, as you said, the flywheel will start to turn and it will start to get faster and faster and faster. And then you will get to where you want to get to a whole lot more quickly.
Yeah, just one last thing on this. I remember having a conversation with a visionary 10 years ago and could still picture where I was. And, remember having the conversation the upshot of the conversation was, I'm paraphrasing, "Hey, Jack, you do realize that if everybody was like and thought like you, they wouldn't be here and they'd be running their own business." I feel that there's a respect and an understanding as a visionary that, people, if people were thinking and feeling the same, they wouldn't be in your business.
It's true. They would be offering their own. Okay, our next question I think is really interesting because it's why do visionaries often struggle to finish what they start, even when they deeply care about the business? And we always say we don't give rocks to visionaries because their attention span is not going to hold out for a full 90 days. But why do you think that is? Why do they struggle to finish what they start?
Sorry, what was the question? Like, but that's the point. Is like, I'm bored already. I want to go on. I need and want the next thing. So it's almost kind of like being the instigator or the fire starter. Is like, now that the touch paper has been lit, it's like, cool. You guys get on with it. I'm off. I'm off trying to find the next new thing. I I can only speak for myself, but I feel that it's the conceptual idea, the ability to kind of bring things together, and I'm not sure if the listeners or watchers remember a film called The Minority Report. Tom Cruise, and the film's probably about 20 years old, and set in the future, and he was kind of bringing lots of different information with his hands, putting it up on screen, go, what about this? What about this? What about this? And like kind of this molding of kind of ideas and generations. And that's what I find for me, but also with the visionaries alike. It's like it's almost like you're in the matrix or you're observing the matrix and you're able to see things from different perspectives. So when you're able to see, or when I'm able to see those different things, it's like, what about this? The execution part, it's like, oh, okay, that now means there's detail and there's frameworks and there's process. It's like, that's the bit that I find really drains me because I'm having to drop down. And maybe there's a thing about up and down, but in my head, about like dropping down, and it's like, so understanding what excites you and what drains you, I think is important. But also then knowing is that, if you create the right people, then you get people who go, oh my God, I love the detail. I want to take those. I can't come up with those ideas, but I can take an idea and I can execute, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It's like, I don't care. Just get on and do it. Like, I don't want to know. Like, yeah, we've agreed that this is the thing, but like, just allow me to now work on the next thing. Sorry.
No, I think it comes down, if you think about it, a visionary is a type of personality, right? And we know that most visionaries usually are somewhere on the ADHD scale. They usually, if you think about the Colby profile, they're quick starts. There's certain characteristics which actually define them. That's where they are a visionary and not an integrator and not a worker bee. And those personality traits are the things that actually stop them from being able to do the level of detail, getting down in the weeds, because it's just not naturally their style. And I think that's really important. That's why knowing thyself is really important, but also knowing the rest of your team and what they love to do. Because if you get to understand your team really well and you understand what they love and are great at, then you can hand off that stuff that bores the shit out of you and give it to somebody else who's going to get really excited by it. I mean, I always used to joke about my ex-husband being an actuary. The things that he loved bored the pants off of me, but he just would get really engrossed in it. And so it's like, great, have people around you that are diverse so you can throw that stuff to them and they're going to get off on it while you can carry on with your big ideas.
Yeah. I just, on that aspect around know thyself, it's also about knowing your energy as well. So, I was reflecting that rant, which felt like a bit of a rant. Like I could feel my energy pumping in my body. It's like, okay, well, that's the things that excite me. What's the things that don't excite me? Like understanding that difference, I feels like really important. Okay, next question. What should a visionary stop doing immediately if they want the business to grow beyond them?
Well, it links into what we are just talking about, right? It's really about getting very, very clear around where your strengths are, where you add the most value. And in EOS, we talk about delegating and elevating to your God given talent or unique ability. And I think it applies to everybody, but particularly the visionary, is just making sure that you really are playing in this space that you love and are great at, so that you really are adding the most value to the business. Because we know when we're doing that stuff, that is where it adds the most value. And what happens is we keep jumping back in and wanting to meddle in the weeds and meddle in the day-to-day stuff. And then that takes us away from where we can really add the most value. So what should they stop doing? All that stuff that they're not great at, or even that there's a lot of stuff we get involved in that we're good at, but we don't necessarily like, but we kind of feel that we can do it better than anybody else, and so we don't want to let go. When you let go of that stuff, it just frees up so much time, and that's the opportunity cost if you continue to keep doing that.
Yeah. I think for me, it goes back to what we said before, what I said before, which was around if you're the only one that's having the conversation and you're not getting the challenge, I feel that you should stop doing that. Unless you want to dictate. Look, if you're listening to this and you want a dictatorship, great. Crack on.
But that comes down to knowing thyself too. If that's what you actually want, then do that. Don't try and be what everybody else says you should be.
Yeah. And maybe actually just as I'm reflecting as we go in, maybe the thing you should stop doing is to be blaming others. Because actually if things aren't working and you're the owner, founder, visionary, and you're sitting at the top of the tree, you know, you're responsible and accountable for creating what's there. So if the business isn't working, if the team isn't achieving, if you're not getting the numbers that you want, what you should stop doing is blaming everybody else and actually look in the mirror and go, okay, what's the conditions that I need to create to allow success to happen within this business? And, you know, sometimes, having somebody external coming in and, whether it be you or I or an EOS implementer to hold the space and to challenge the team. Sometimes that's what's needed. Sometimes it may well be bringing in the integrator. Other times it may well be a case of, we need a board or we need a coach. Like if there's problems going on, the chances are you've created them.
Yep, fair enough. And that kind of leads very nicely on to the next one, because the question is around how does a visionary know whether they need better discipline, better people, or a true integrator type partner? And I'd add to that, or whether they actually need to look in the mirror themselves and see what's going on. But yeah, how does a visionary know whether they need better discipline, better people, or a true integrator type partner?
Is it working? Has it been working? Is it going to continue working? And those kind of deep soul searching questions is what is it that I am trying to achieve for self and or the business? And then going, right, okay, could I be a better version of myself? Could we be a better team? What do we need to do differently? If irrespective as to whether you're doing EOS, I feel strongly that you should be asking those questions continually, because otherwise you're just stagnating.
Well, I think it goes back to that sort of clarity break thing, and we recommend this for all of our clients, is to actually take time out on a regular basis to literally ask those questions: what's working, what's not working, and they're hitting the ceiling. The answer usually lies if you're feeling stuck and you feel like it's not working, which is why most people look for help in the first place, because they feel like they have hit that ceiling, they are feeling stuck. It's going to come down to one of those 5 things. Are you keeping things as simple as they need to be? Are you delegating and elevating when you go beyond your 100% capacity? Are you predicting short-term and long-term in the business well? Have you systemized all of your core processes? And have you got the right structure to execute on the plan? And if you ask those kind of 5 questions, the answer will lay in there somewhere. And then you can delve deeper and go, right, what's really going on? And I think we have to remember, when we talk about issues, there is a tendency, especially for visionaries, especially male visionaries, to want to jump in and kind of solve the issue as it is stated, when often the issue that is stated is not the real issue. So in asking those questions, even of yourself, you should go a little bit deeper and go, so what is that? What's really going on there? And why is that? And why is that? And what does that mean for us? And who's it affecting? and why is that, and really get to the root cause before you sort of jump in and try and solve it.
Yeah. The 5 whys.
I love the 5 whys. Yeah.
What makes the Visionary Integrator relationship so powerful when it works well?
I think it is I always liken it to a marriage, right? You want somebody who fundamentally is on the same journey as you and wants the same things and has the same values, but they have a slightly different perspective on things, which means they're able to challenge you both ways. I think that if you're a good visionary integrated relationship is where they're actually able to challenge each other and really nut things out in a very constructive, very vulnerable way so they get the best results. And I also think that it is the two pieces of the puzzle that they talk about in Rocket Fuel and again in sort of Visionary is about making sure you've got somebody who is fundamentally different to you and they balance your weaknesses. So their strengths actually balance your weaknesses. So you're not having a person who is so it's easy to get somebody similar to ourselves and put them in there. And of course it's going to be wonderful because it's easy and they're going to say yes, but you're not going to get the most value out of it.
We were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago, which was around integrators that are operational as opposed to strategics. I feel that there's a difference, and there's a capacity and a capability conversation around those two different types of potentially integrators. But actually, it's around the aspect for me around healthy conflicts in do I as the integrator feel comfortable, confident, and supported to push back and challenge. We were talking earlier this week about a word, confrontational.
Yes.
Does the environment exist for both parties from a caring perspective to ask those challenging questions?
Mm.
And if it's not, I'm not sure how strong the relationship actually is. And will you succeed? Absolutely. But you're probably, as a visionary, not going to succeed as well as you could do because the integrator is doing everything that you're telling them to do, or, 70% plus. Like, as a visionary, for me, if I come out of a meeting and go, wow, that was difficult and challenging, but my assumptions have been questioned and challenged, I go, actually, that's really powerful because I was seeing the world and, the idea from my narrow lens. And like you said before, actually, what the integrator has done is they've helped me see a differing perspective. And actually, we've come to a conclusion or a decision or a next step or a to do, which is going to help us get closer to where we need to, not where I say or suggest we need to go to.
It is interesting in the Visionary book, Mark Winters also talks about there are different types of integrators, and you just mentioned that, of course, and different stages of the business do require different types of integrators. So if you're in a high growth phase, the type of integrator you're likely to need will be very, very different where if you're in sort of more of a stabilization phase. And so just like everything on the accountability chart, I always say that the accountability chart is not set in stone. It is a living, breathing document. And you have to look at it almost, well, you should look at it every 90 days. I'm not saying you should change it every 90 days, but you should look at every 90 days and say, is this still the right structure to take us forward? I think with the integrator relationship, it requires visionary integrator relationship. It requires revisiting on a regular basis to go, is this still the best integrator vision relationship that we need for the current stage of the business?
Yeah. So I just wonder then, going off script, which is cool, what's the one or two questions that the visionary and or the integrator should be asking of the relationship in the same page meetings?
Again, I mean, taking it back to basics, it's really, I mean, the two questions I love, what's working, what's not working? When you start thinking about that, it relates to everything. What's working, what's not working. It starts to get things out on the table. But also, if I was in that visionary integrator meeting, is like how being really honest about how we're going against our VTO. How are we truly going against our 10-year picture, 10-year target, sorry. How are we going against our 3-year picture? Are we really moving at the pace that we have agreed to? Because if not, why aren't we? And what is actually going on?
I agree. I think it's the subtleties of the relationship in that when it gets more than 5% out of kilt, the impact then can be seen with very, very easily with the rest of the leadership team, the side conversations. So ensuring that what's working well, even better if, aspect is really, and I've, that's the reason why same page meetings should be, and it depends on the relationship, but, minimum every 4 weeks, probably every 2 weeks, and so I know some that have it weekly, because actually what you're doing is you just check, there's the recalibration. And if that calibration goes too far from either side, that's when it becomes dangerous.
Yeah. And actually, it's something I would like to explore just very briefly. This whole same page meeting, I think that I get pushback in the beginning when I work with EOS clients. They go, oh, but we're meeting all the time. We're talking all the time. The same page meeting is about going deeper. It's a little bit like our EO forums or our sort of tech visage forums, where it isn't about surface level stuff. It's not about having a chat about the weather and what's going on and day-to-day operation. It's about really going deep. And it's about, for me, it is about questioning that longer term vision. Are we actually on track for the longer term vision as much as we are for the day-to-day stuff? Because the day-to-day stuff should be handled at the leadership team level. This is really about, are we taking the business forward? And so, yep, weekly, fortnightly, monthly, the cadence doesn't matter so much, provided you're putting aside the real time to have those deep and meaningful conversations. And so if you're having it weekly, an hour doesn't cut it, I'm sorry, because that's not enough to actually go deep. We've been talking for almost an hour now, and that there is so much more that we could talk about. And if you think about those VI same page meetings, an hour can be very surface level. Sometimes you need to have a little bit longer to really go deeper on some of those issues. So I don't think it matters too much about the frequency, but it should be at least once a month. Even in established businesses have been going for a long time. And when you've got a business that is growing really fast, the cadence needs to be more regular, but it still needs a decent amount of time to allow you to get deep on those issues.
Let's take this one, and then it feels like we need to probably break and then do the second version.
I'd agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm a yes person. Yes, yes, Adam, absolutely.
Where does the visionary integrator relationship usually go wrong? So ego, communication, trust, control, or all of the above?
I think it tends to go wrong when there's a little bit of an imbalance and they're not both prepared to be really open and honest about the way things are going. So I'm just reflecting on my clients and thinking about where I have seen it go wrong, is that where either the integrators kind of given up on pushing back against the visionary because they feel like they've been knocked back too many times, or I think it's communication and trust are probably the two biggest things. It's like, if you're not prepared to have the open and honest conversations and have the trust to actually really challenge it when you think things are going wrong, it's like every relationship. If you haven't got those two things, you're not going to get there. That's my view.
I agree. I think there's an aspect which is as soon as it's almost like the energy shifts. It's like, I can't be bothered. I haven't got the energy to kind of push back or challenge or hold the space, or like it's almost like that's the beginning of the end. And I think actually there's probably people that are listening to this that are already there with that relationship, and it's probably been there potentially not even months, potentially years, but the need to change is, and the pain of changing or adapting either the relationship and the boundaries, or getting a new person in, is too difficult. So it's like, do you know what? It ain't broke, so I'll just leave it as it is.
But we see this in personal relationships too, don't we, as well? And it's like, you've got to be very, very careful. It's like you've either got to commit to working on it and being really open and honest about what needs to change and work together to actually fix it. Or sometimes you have to say, this just isn't working and it's time to move on.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, I'm going to be, I've seen this a couple of times just recently, actually. The integrator knows it's not right and know that they aren't necessarily the right person for that visionary, but they don't necessarily want to lose their job or lose their income. And you see this in not just visionary integrated relationship, but in all kind of relationships. It's like, yeah. And so you have to really challenge them and sort of say, yeah, but yeah, sure, it's great to have money coming in every week and it's great to have a title and everything else, but are you truly happy? And what is it costing you? Because life's too short. That's my favorite saying. Life's too bloody short to be doing something you don't love with people you love. And so what are you doing?
Yeah, that self-preservation piece is a dangerous place to be in. And also there's this aspect which is, you know, Your sole responsibility is to make yourself redundant. Ideally, that's through, delegating and elevating, automation, getting rid of the things that you don't need to do. But actually, if it's the case that it's not the right fit for you,
Yep.
like a recruitment company of mine in the UK spoke about this aspect of saving souls. So if you're sat in a position that is not giving you the energy, you don't GWC it. Let's go back to basics. If you don't GWC it, what's the point? It's a waste of time.
And a square peg in a round hole always feels out of place. So go be a square peg in a square hole. Okay, let's wrap this up. There's three. I like to always ask for 3 top tips or tools. So I've got a couple, and I'll ask you for a couple as well. So I mean, my first thing is read the Rocket Fuel book, read the Visionary book. They are great. They've got some really nice questions in there that will really start you thinking about this stuff. But also there is the Rocket Fuel Index, I think it's called. No, the Rocket. I don't know. I can't remember what it's called. I'll put the crystallizer assessment. That's what there is a Rocket Fuel Index as well. But the crystallizer assessment is a really good starting point to help you understand, where you are on that scale of being a visionary and an integrator. And then there is some deeper stuff on the Rocket Fuel University and in the Visionary book that really gets you thinking about what is the right integrator for you and who do you need in that role. So that would be my tip.
Couple for me, I think whether you're the visionary or the integrator listening to this or anybody, I think do the delegate and elevate tool. I think the other one for me is about really sitting down and, actually this would be a really good thing to do in a same page meeting or on your own. Do I really GWC? Like if nobody else is around and I'm really going internal and I'm taking that time to reflect, do I really GWC? That's what I'd leave it with.
Fantastic. Hey, great to chat to you. We'll come back and we'll do a second part of this, which I don't know when we'll do it, but we'll definitely do that. So look out for part 2. Always a pleasure to chat to you, Adam.
I'll see you soon.